Hello, just a little thought here. Just something I noticed, which it seems to be kind of like indicative of the way that the people who think of themselves as the left have behaved as things have changed. One of the examples was with the so-called LGBT community. Much as I hate that word community, yeah, about what things used to be, the stuff that stemmed from gay liberation, as it used to be called, which was had actual things to address, laws that discriminated directly against people and just needed to be removed because they were discriminatory. Just getting people to be able to live their lives on an equal basis, yeah, equal opportunity, essentially, yeah. Now what happens with the gay stuff and the LGBT community, yeah, was that once we had got things like gay marriage, once we had got all these things where we had the same rights in everything you could think of, yeah. Once we had got equality, which was a number of years ago now, yeah. But once we had got equality, what were the people, the organizations, and the movement which had been based upon this need to address these things? What was it going to do? Well, it had to find another constituency, basically, and what they turned to, and well, and now part of the problem with that was that yes, they had the question of like transsexuals, and they could look at like the problems that transsexuals might have, yeah. But that's a tiny, tiny, tiny constituency, yeah. And there isn't in that case, and I mean the gay community was small enough, yeah. But the trans community was tiny. They had to find another way, and what they did was they found it through the whole transgender activism scam, yeah. And they built that into their thing. But they switched. You see, they switched from being a kind of a representation of people's needs and and their interests or what have you. They switched to becoming a kind of self-serving, self-supporting phenomenon. Yeah, and that's why they went the way of authoritarianism, of out and out authoritarianism, rather than appealing to people's moral sense as we did, like say in the 60s or since then, to say, look, it's cruel what's happening to people. They shouldn't be persecuted for this, that, or the other. Just leave them alone. Yeah, it went to this crazy thing where we're pushing all sorts of stuff, yeah, and trying to bring in laws. We're not trying to remove bad laws, yeah. What happened after a while was that movement, which had lost its raison d'être, it had lost it, and so it had to refine something. But what it refound required not the removal of bad laws, not the representation of people's genuine needs in a social circumstance, but instead it was to implement more and more laws to control people, to kind of cooperate with all sorts of ideologues, forms of politics, such as postmodern, post-Marxist ideologies, yeah, and doing all this sort of stuff, yeah. More and more control, more and more control, and in a lot of ways, those ideologues and the people that they can kind of like listen to, a whole bunch of people that they can kind of like indoctrinate, they became the new constituency. It wasn't any longer gay people. It wasn't any longer gays, lesbians, bisexuals, or transsexuals. It actually wasn't anybody. Half the time, it's not even anybody who's actually really transgender. It's people who they've managed to persuade. Yeah, this is either in their interest as activists, yeah, or they've managed to sort of like really create a need. They've manufactured a need. Yeah, they've manufactured it because they lost their constituency, because they'd either done the job or the world had changed or what have you, and so they shifted in that way. Um, And so now, rather than being a movement to represent genuine needs in society and that rooted in people's lives, they've become a movement or organizations to actually represent and serve activists. Yeah, not the same at all. They're actually servicing and representing activists and ideologues who who claim to speak for us, and believe me, they don't. Yeah. And this is why now you find that so people who say, hold on a second, yeah, we don't agree with this, they are excommunicated, they are turned against, yeah, they become, you know, they become the undesirables, the deplorables, yeah. And so gay men and lesbians who want to actually say, just say protect their own spaces or what have you, they are now the enemy. They are the, you know, the supposed fascists. They are the, in quotes, far right of the LGBTQ movement. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing here is that exactly the same sort of process has happened with things like the Labour Party, yeah, which used to be a representation of the working class, of the British working class. That was its idea. That was its raison d'etre. And now, aside from the fact that working class generally doesn't like socialism because they're just too smart and too grounded to generally like things like socialism, yeah, as it actually is. Ask anybody from Eastern Europe what socialism actually is, yeah? Not like some sort of like, you know, not social liberalism in a mixed economy with a few welfare ideas that you borrowed from Otto von Bismarck or something, yeah? No, no. Real socialism people don't like, the working classes don't like, yeah. So that was always a problem. That was a persisting problem, yeah. But beyond that, you've also got this situation where we've become a kind of post-industrial country, yeah. And so the Labour Party has essentially lost its traditional constituency, yeah. And so what it's done, just as with the gay activists, so-called gay activists, you know what I mean, yeah. But just as with them, the Labour Party has had to find a new constituency, and its constituency is like a middle class, graduate, you know, metropolitan, and people who essentially identify or see their interest as lying with this new elite, which is the new ruling elite. This is the new ruling elite, yeah. And so the same process has happened, and just as with, you know, the way that the supposed LGBT movement has basically turned against the gay men and lesbians who were at the core of it, yeah. Just as, and they have been sort of like, so they're called TERFs, and basically, you know, and whatever it is that they want to throw at them, yeah. The equivalent of far right, yeah. So just as they got that, similarly, the Labour Party has essentially re-identified its constituency, re-identified where its interests lie in terms of maintaining itself, and they have turned against the working class, the British working class, the traditional British working class, yeah. They now see, and they vilify openly as being far-right, racist, xenophobic, whatever you want to say. It's exactly the same process. It's exactly the same process, yeah. Now, of course, what's happening with the Labour Party is a lot more serious than what's happening with the LGBT movement, because the LGBT movement in itself is actually really small, yeah. You know, I'm a homosexual man. It's important to me. But look, don't kid yourself, yeah. It's far more important what's happening in the country as a whole. Yeah, we live in one society, we live in this one world, and we share these people and this land. Yeah. But that's what I can see as happening. Yeah. It's not a good picture. It really isn't. But it's interesting to see. I think it's really important to try and think clearly about things. Try and look at it. What actually happened? What actually happened? And start naming it. Start talking about it. start understanding, take apart these lies which are continually woven, that the Labour Party represents working people, and that the Conservative Party actually is conservative, you know. It's crazy, it really is. That the working class are racist, backward. You know who's racist? The people who supported Black Lives Matter, because you know what? That was an entirely racist ideology. They have racializing thinking, just as doing the same thing with gender, doing the same thing with sexuality. These things are all in themselves, they are mired in a thoroughly prejudiced, fixated way of thinking. Now what they do is they flip it and they say, we're dealing with this. They're not dealing with anything. They are simply playing division and destruction, because it's just what they do, I guess. But it's really important, I think, to try and think about things clearly, and to just kind of keep up with that. Keep your mind clear and describe things accurately. Don't get taken in by these terms. Far right, racist, blah, 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 Nazi, scam, etc. Yeah? Don't get taken in by those things. Don't get taken in by these terms like turf or what have you. Don't get taken in by them. Start looking at things, start calling things exactly what they are. The people of this country are not racist by nature. They are like any other people, and they're very tolerant. The working class people are not the racists. They're not the people upholding a racist ideology. That would be people like Keir Starmer, very clearly. So just be clear on things. Get your mind clear and keep your feet on the ground.